The Devil's Den sat on the edge of Millfield like a scar the town couldn't hide. Cigarette smoke clung to the low ceiling, mixing with the smell of stale beer and motor oil that seemed to seep from the walls. A jukebox wheezed out a tired Lynyrd Skynyrd tune, its neon glow painting the room in shades of red and amber. Knives had scarred the wooden tables, bottles had cracked across them. This was not a place for strangers. It was a place where people came to forget or to bleed. The door creaked open, and for a moment the noise inside staggered into silence. Danielle Williams stepped through like she owned the air she breathed. Mid-30s, tall, every movement precise, years of discipline stitched into her posture. Her dark skin caught the neon light as she scanned the room. One sweep of the eyes, but it wasn't casual, it was calculation. She counted exits, registered hands too close to pockets, and clocked the faces that looked away too fast. Marines never stopped reading a room, not even 7 years after the war had ended for them. The regulars felt it too, though they couldn't name it. Conversations dimmed into whispers. The pool game in the back stuttered to a halt. Men hunched over the bar shifted in their stools. She didn't flinch, didn't hurry. Danielle crossed the floor like it belonged to her, boots scuffing against sticky wood until she reached the bar. "Whiskey neat," she said, voice calm, steady. The bartender, Eli, a kid with soft eyes that looked like they'd seen too much already, nodded quickly. His hands trembled as he poured, not from inexperience but from fear of the room behind her. Danielle placed her palms flat on the bar, watching the bottles as though they were a map. She could feel the eyes on her back. She knew the danger, but danger was something she had learned to live with. Snake was the first to move, a mountain of leather and beer brie. He shoved away from his chair and swaggered toward her. He smelled like rust and bad decisions. His friends trailed behind, chuckling low, eager for the spectacle. "What do we have here?" His voice was thick, carrying across the bar. "Don't think I've seen you before. This ain't your kind of place, sweetheart." Danielle didn't answer. She lifted the glass Eli had set down, let the whiskey burn her throat, and looked at Snake's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The silence was too much for him. Snake lunged forward, his thick fingers snatching at her jacket sleeve. Denim ripped with a sound that cut sharper than the jukebox. The bar saw a glimpse of ink, the Marine Corps emblem, bold and unshaken, the eagle, globe, and anchor. The room froze, not out of respect, out of recognition. Men who'd done time in uniform knew what that tattoo meant. Men who hadn't still understood instinctively, this was not prey. This was a predator trained in wars they couldn't imagine. Danielle turned slowly, her face calm as stone. Snake's grin faltered, caught somewhere between mockery and the creeping realization that he'd grabbed something far more dangerous than he could handle. "You picked the wrong bar," he sneered, trying to hold on to his bravado. "Did I?" Her tone was even, almost amused, but her eyes held no warmth. The weight of her stare made the air feel heavier, like the pressure before a storm. Snake's friends shifted uneasily. Some of the patrons looked away, suddenly very interested in their drinks. From the corner booth, Rex Thompson rose, built like a linebacker who'd never retired, with a gray beard trimmed neat and eyes sharp as broken glass. He watched with the patience of a chess master. He'd read the room, read the woman, and knew Snake was about to light a fire none of them could control. "Snake." His voice was low, but it carried like a command. The biker froze mid-step. "Let her be," Rex said, his tone final. Snake's jaw worked, but he swallowed his protest. His hand dropped from Danielle's sleeve, though his glare promised this wasn't over. He slouched back to his table, muttering under his breath. Rex never broke eye contact with Danielle. Then, with the smallest of smiles, he gestured to Eli. "Buy the lady another drink. On me." The bar held its breath as Rex leaned back into his booth, eyes never leaving hers. "Stay as long as you like," he said. And just like that, the game had begun. The jukebox sputtered into silence, as if even the machine knew better than to compete with the tension in the room. The moment Snake slunk back to his table, the air thickened with whispers and sidelong glances. Danielle didn't move. She kept her eyes on the amber glow of her whiskey, rolling the glass between her palms like it was the only thing that mattered. Inside, her pulse ticked steady, controlled, battlefield calm. Outwardly, she was stone. Eli slid closer, his hands restless with a bar rag. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a kind of softness that didn't belong in a place like this. His eyes carried grief, though, the kind that settled deep and never left. He leaned in as if confiding a secret, his voice pitched just for her. "Lady," he murmured, "I don't know what brought you here tonight, but you picked the wrong place." Danielle turned her head slightly, catching his reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way his shoulders hunched as though waiting for a blow. She took a slow sip before answering. "Did I?" she asked, her tone mild, almost playful. Eli's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "The serpents don't like outsiders, especially not someone who—" He cut himself off, but they both knew what he meant, especially not someone like her. Danielle set her glass down with a soft click, her fingers steady. "Good thing I'm not here to make friends." For a moment, neither spoke. The room hummed with low voices and the scrape of chairs, but there was a current under it all, something taut and waiting to snap. Then a drunk stumbled from a back table, weaving through the haze of smoke and neon. His shoulder clipped Danielle's arm, sending beer sloshing onto the bar. The man wheeled around, belligerent, ready to start something. Danielle caught his wrist before he could raise it. Her grip was firm but not cruel, a steadying anchor instead of a shove. "Easy there, friend," she said softly. The drunk blinked, trying to focus. Her calmness disarmed him faster than any shove would have. "Sorry, miss, didn't see you." He shuffled away, suddenly sober enough to keep his distance. Eli had frozen mid-polish, his eyes wide. He'd seen fights start over far less. But Danielle had diffused it without a spark. He recognized the economy of her movements, the way she turned aggression into silence. His chest tightened with memory. His brother had carried himself like that, before Afghanistan had swallowed him whole. "You served," Eli said quietly, pouring her another drink, though she hadn't asked. Danielle's eyes flicked to his, sharp and assessing. "What makes you say that?" "The way you handled him. The way you sit. My brother was Army. He taught me to recognize the signs." His voice cracked just slightly on the word brother. She didn't confirm, didn't deny. Instead, she gave the smallest nod. "I'm sorry for your loss." Eli's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, weighted with understanding neither needed to speak aloud, but then the scrape of chairs cut through it, heavy boots striking the floor. 3 serpents had decided they'd watched long enough. Snake wasn't with them, but his shadow hung over the men as they closed in. One was tall and wiry, tattoos crawling up his neck. Another looked like he'd spent his life lifting engines. The third had a grin that didn't reach his eyes. They spread out behind Danielle, hemming her in. "Oh well," the wiry one drawled. "Looks like we got ourselves some entertainment tonight." Danielle didn't turn. She lifted her glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down with deliberate calm. In the mirror, she caught the flash of metal in a biker's belt, the hunger in their eyes. Eli's hand moved under the bar, reaching for the bat he kept there, but Danielle caught his gaze in the reflection and gave the slightest shake of her head. "Don't," her eyes said. The leader leaned closer, close enough that Danielle could smell the sour tang of beer on his breath. "This ain't your kind of neighborhood, sweetheart." The word dripped like poison. Around the bar, conversations stuttered and fell silent again. Patrons leaned back, trying to disappear. Danielle turned at last, swiveling slowly on her stool. Her face was calm, her voice low but razor-edged. "I heard you," she said, "but I don't remember asking for directions." The room seemed to tilt with the words. The bikers stiffened, ready for violence, and then a single word cut through the tension like steel. "Enough." It came from the corner booth, from Rex Thompson himself. His voice was low, but it carried absolute authority. The bikers froze. Rex leaned forward, his eyes locked on Danielle. Sharp, calculating, patient. He saw her stance, her breathing, the way she'd refused to yield. "Let her be," he said, his tone final. The bikers hesitated, then stepped back, retreating into the haze. Rex's gaze didn't waver. He gave a small nod to Eli. "Another drink," he ordered. "For the Marine." The bar exhaled, but no one dared move. Too quickly. Danielle picked up her glass again, calm as if nothing had happened. But inside, she knew the board had shifted. The game had just begun. The night air outside the Devil's Den was heavier than the smoke inside. The parking lot stretched wide and cracked, its gravel scattered with beer caps and cigarette butts. A single bulb buzzed above the door, casting a sickly cone of yellow light that barely reached the broken-down cars at the far end. Danielle stepped out first, her jacket pulled close, her boots crunching against gravel. Every muscle in her body was coiled, but outwardly, she looked calm, controlled, deliberate. She'd learned long ago that danger never announced itself with a shout. It crept, quiet and patient, then struck when you let your guard down. That was why she didn't flinch when she heard the door swing open behind her, or when boots hit the ground in rhythm. 3 shadows peeled away from the bar's entrance. Snake led them, his swagger darker now, less bravado, more venom. His nose was still bleeding faintly from where she'd shoved him earlier, and the humiliation burned hotter than the alcohol in his veins. He'd brought backup this time, two younger serpents eager to prove themselves, their hands twitching toward the weapons strapped to their belts. "Thought you'd just stroll out, huh?" Snake's voice carried across the lot, ugly and sharp. "Flash your little tattoo, make us all tremble. You don't walk into our place, humiliate me, and leave with your head held high." Danielle stopped walking. She didn't turn. Her breath came slow, steady, measured. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the electric buzz of the bulb and the crunch of gravel as the bikers closed in. Finally, she faced them. Her eyes met Snake's, cold and steady. "You want to do this here?" Snake spat into the dirt. "Damn right I do." He flicked his hand, and the wiry kid to his left pulled a knife, the blade catching the weak light. The other reached behind his back, fingers grazing the grip of a pistol. Danielle's gaze narrowed. She didn't back away. "Bad idea." Snake grinned, but the grin was too wide, too desperate. He lunged forward. It was over before the others even realized what had happened. Danielle stepped into him, catching his wrist mid-swing. Her body moved like muscle memory, like instinct honed by years of training. She twisted his arm, driving his elbow down against the hood of a rusted-out car. Bone met steel with a sickening crack. Snake howled, dropping the knife, his body collapsing onto the hood. The wiry kid rushed in wild, blade flashing, but Danielle pivoted. She grabbed his wrist, slammed her elbow into his jaw, and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the gravel hard, the knife spinning out of reach. The third man froze, pistol halfway out. His eyes darted from Snake writhing in pain to his friend coughing blood in the dirt. His fingers trembled, but before he could pull the weapon free, a clang rang out. Eli. The bartender had followed, clutching an old tire iron like it was the only thing keeping him standing. He swung with every ounce of fear and fury in his body, the iron crashing against the biker's forearm. The pistol clattered to the ground, and the man screamed, stumbling back. Eli stood panting, the tire iron still raised, his hands shaking. His eyes met Danielle's for a fraction of a second, half apology, half defiance. He'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Danielle bent down, scooping the pistol off the ground before it could be claimed again. She checked the chamber, clicked the safety on, and tucked it into the back of her waistband. Her eyes swept the lot once more, her breathing steady, her stop, unbroken. Snake groaned from the hood, clutching his arm. You're dead," he rasped. "Rex won't let this slide, you hear me? You're dead." Danielle stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. Her voice was low, almost calm, but sharp enough to cut through the night. "You should have thought of that before you touched me." She turned away, nodding toward Eli, who still stood frozen, tire iron clutched tight. "You okay?" Eli nodded quickly, though his knuckles were white around the iron. I didn't mean to." "You did fine," Danielle cut him off. Her tone was softer now, carrying something like respect. "But this doesn't end here. They'll come harder next time." Eli's throat worked as he swallowed. "Then you need to know something." His voice dropped low, urgent. "That man you're looking for, the one with the scar, they've been keeping him at the Pines Motor Lodge. Room 17. Pays cash. No one else goes near." Danielle's eyes sharpened. She didn't ask how he knew. She just filed it away. The sound of groaning bikers behind them filled the night, but Danielle didn't look back. She and Eli walked toward the edge of the lot, their footsteps quick, their shadows stretching long across the gravel. Behind them, Snake's promise still echoed in the dark. Ahead of them, the truth waited in room 17. The Pines Motor Lodge squatted at the edge of town like a relic that had given up on surviving. Its neon sign flickered half-dead, buzzing a weak red glow into the night, casting shadows across cracked asphalt and weeds that had claimed the parking lot. Most of the rooms were dark, their curtains drawn tight, the kind of place people used when they wanted to disappear. Danielle's boots crunched softly against the pavement as she moved between the cars, her breath controlled, her eyes sweeping each shadow like she was back on patrol in Kandahar. Room 17. The curtains leaked a thin sliver of yellow light, crooked as if pulled in a hurry. She stopped just short of the door, her hand brushing the cold steel of the pistol tucked into her waistband. She didn't draw it, not yet. Her training had taught her something truer than any weapon. Information was power, and she needed to see the man before she judged him. Through the gap in the curtain, she saw him. Cole Bradford. He looked older than the photo she had folded in her pocket, older than the man who had once stood beside her unit in desert heat. His hair was grayer, his shoulders slumped, his movements restless. He carried the scar that marked him, an ugly white line running jagged across his jaw, disappearing into his collar. He was packing quickly, tossing clothes into a duffel, sweat beating on his temple, even though the room's fan rattled at full blast. Danielle's jaw tightened. This was the man she had chased for 7 years, the man who had betrayed their convoy, whose choice had left men dead and her brother among them. She had imagined this moment 100 times, the reckoning, the bullet, the justice. Yet standing outside, watching him fumble with his bag, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not rage, not triumph, something heavier. She knocked. The sound was sharp, echoing down the hollow walkway. Cole froze, every muscle locked. Slowly he reached for the pistol lying on the dresser. "Cole Bradford," Danielle said, her voice steady. "It's been a long time." There was silence, then the scrape of metal against wood as he lifted the gun. The door opened a crack, the chain still fastened. His eyes appeared first, haunted, bloodshot, recognizing her instantly. "Williams," he rasped, his voice raw. "Of course it's you." Danielle met his gaze, unflinching. "Open the door." He hesitated, then slid the chain free. The door swung wide, and there they stood, two soldiers, two ghosts of the same war, staring across a chasm dug by betrayal. Cole's hand shook around the pistol, but he didn't raise it. He looked smaller up close, worn down by years of running. "You should have killed me back then," he muttered. Danielle stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The room smelled of sweat, cheap whiskey, and desperation. "That thought's crossed my mind more than once," she said, "but I need answers before I decide how this ends." Cole let out a bitter laugh, setting the gun back on the dresser with a clatter. He rubbed his face with both hands, groaning. "You think I wanted any of it? You think I betrayed you for money?" He dropped his hands and looked at her, eyes wet with something between guilt and exhaustion. "They had my daughter, Danielle. They showed me pictures, her school, her bedroom window. I gave them what they asked because they promised they'd let her live." Danielle's chest tightened, but her expression stayed hard. "And you thought their promises were worth my brother's life? Worth all of them?" Cole flinched, his face crumpling. "I didn't know they'd hit that hard. I thought it would be a supply run, not a massacre." He shook his head, the weight of it pressing down. "I see their faces every night. Do you think I sleep? Do you think I drink because I like the taste?" For the first time, Danielle's breath faltered. She had carried rage like a weapon for years, had sharpened it against his memory. But hearing him break in front of her, seeing the ruin of the man who'd once been a Marine like her, made the edges blur. "Who were they?" she asked quietly. Cole sat heavily on the edge of the bed, his hands gripping his knees. "Not just the Serpents. They're runners, middlemen. The orders came from higher. Contractors, politicians maybe. Rex Thompson's the one who holds the leash in this town. He's their distributor, their enforcer. Without him, the whole chain doesn't move." Danielle's mind raced, fitting the pieces together. She had come for Cole, but this was bigger. Killing him would be personal satisfaction. Taking down Rex and whoever backed him, that would be justice. Cole's eyes lifted to hers, hollow but pleading. "If you want Rex, you'll need me. I know their roots, their codes, their habits. I can get you inside, but..." He trailed off, his voice breaking. "Just don't let them get her. Don't let them touch my daughter." Danielle stood in the middle of the room, her hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to hate him, to end it here, but his words dug under her skin, rooting in the cracks of her anger. Her brother was gone. No truth could change that. But there was still a girl out there, a child, who might pay the price for sins she hadn't committed. Her voice was low, steady, heavy with choice. "Then you're going to help me burn it all down?" Cole nodded once, slowly, as if surrendering to the only fate left. His shoulders sagged, but in his eyes, a flicker of resolve sparked. And outside the thin motel walls, a motorcycle engine growled in the distance, closer, circling, as if the Serpents already knew she was here. The Devil's Den looked different when Danielle returned the next night. The laughter was louder, the music meaner, and the smoke sat so thick it turned the ceiling into a storm cloud. Word had spread. Everyone knew why she was here now. Rex had made sure of it. A circle had been cleared in the middle of the floor, chairs and tables shoved back against the walls. The wooden boards of the floor were scuffed and stained, old blood ground into the cracks like history written in red. Danielle stood at the edge of that circle, her jaw set, her fists loose but ready. She wasn't nervous. She was calculating, every sense alive. Rex sat in his throne of a chair near the bar, watching with the quiet patience of a man who had seen countless men broken in this room. He leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes sharp as glass. "You walk into my house and stir the pot," he said, his voice carrying through the crowd. "Now you'll prove whether you belong here or not. 3 fights. Win, you live. Lose, you don't walk out." The crowd roared approval, boots stomping against the floorboards. Danielle's gaze didn't leave Rex. "And when I win?" she asked evenly. A smile tugged at his beard. "Then maybe we talk business." The first fighter was a kid barely old enough to shave, all cocky grins and jittering hands. They called him Tommy, and he bounced into the circle like he was about to play a game. Danielle almost pitied him. Almost. The bell wasn't real, just the slam of a beer bottle against a table. Tommy lunged fast, swinging wild. Danielle ducked, let his momentum carry him forward, and drove her fist into his ribs. He gasped, folded, then staggered back up with rage in his eyes. Another swing, another miss. Danielle stepped close, a quick jab to his temple, and he dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. The crowd jeered, some laughing, some angry. Rex didn't move. He just raised 2 fingers, and the next man stepped in. Crusher. If Tommy was a boy, Crusher was a wall with fists. His chest was broad, his arms thick with muscle that flexed as he rolled his shoulders. He grinned wide, teeth yellow, before charging like a bull. Danielle braced, dodging to the side, her knuckles snapping into his jaw. He didn't flinch. His arm wrapped around her waist, and suddenly she was slammed against the boards, breath leaving her in a rush. Pain radiated through her ribs, but she kept her head clear. Crusher loomed, fists hammering down. She rolled, his knuckles cracking wood where her face had been. She clawed her way to her feet, lungs burning. He swung again. She ducked, jammed her elbow into his throat. He gagged, but stayed up. A knee to her gut sent her staggering. The crowd was on its feet now, screaming, blood-hungry. Danielle steadied herself, spat iron from her mouth, and locked eyes with him. He came again, slower this time, trying to pin her down. She stepped in close, wrapped her arm around his thick neck, and squeezed. Her bicep pressed against his windpipe, her legs braced. He thrashed, lifted her off her feet, tried to slam her down, but she held. Seconds stretched long. Finally, he choked, gurgled, then collapsed, dragging her down with him. Danielle rolled free, chest heaving, blood smearing her knuckles. Crusher lay twitching, gasping for air. She staggered to her feet, every muscle screaming, but her eyes never left Rex. The Serpent boss leaned back, slow applause echoing against the walls. "Not bad," he said. Then he lifted a finger, and the last fighter stepped forward. They called him Vulture. His frame was lean, his eyes cold, his movements precise. No wasted energy, no arrogance, just quiet cruelty. He carried himself like someone who had fought too many times and never cared about the cost. The circle closed in tighter, silence falling. Danielle flexed her bloodied hands, forcing her breath even. Vulture tilted his head, smirking. "Heard about your brother," he drawled. "Marcus, right? Shame what happened to him. Must eat you alive, knowing he screamed before the end." The words hit harder than any punch. Danielle's vision blurred red, her pulse hammering in her ears. She lunged, fist swinging sharp, rage carrying her forward. Vulture sidestepped, his elbow slamming into or ribs. Pain burst like fireworks, but she didn't stop. She drove at him again, landing a hard blow to his jaw. He grinned through the blood, mocking her. They traded blows, brutal, bone on bone, until her knuckles split open and blood slicked her hands. Finally, she caught his leg with a sweep, sent him crashing to the boards. He tried to rise, but Danielle was on him, her fist pounding again and again until his leg bent wrong under her knee and his scream ripped through the air. The room erupted. Cheers, shouts, chaos. Danielle stood over him, chest heaving, blood dripping from her knuckles. She looked at Rex. He was smiling now, wide and dangerous. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Welcome to the family, Marine." The crowd roared, but Danielle knew the truth. She wasn't one of them. Not now, not ever. She had just walked deeper into the lion's den, and the only way out was through fire. The devil's den had emptied into a quieter hum after the blood was cleaned from the boards. Most of the crowd staggered home drunk on adrenaline and whiskey, but a handful of serpents lingered, their laughter sharp as glass in the smoky air. Danielle sat at a back booth, her knuckles raw and throbbing, a glass of untouched bourbon in front of her. She didn't drink. She never drank after a fight. Her head needed to stay clear. Across from her, Rex leaned back in his chair, one massive hand curling around a cigar, the other resting easy on the table. His beard caught the light from the overhead bulb, his gray eyes fixed on her with an unnerving calm. He wasn't gloating about her victories. He wasn't even congratulating her. He was studying her the way a man studies a knife before deciding whether to sheath it or put it to someone's throat. "You've got discipline," Rex said finally, smoke curling from his mouth. "Not like my boys. They're muscle, noise. You're clean. You thins. Like before you strike. Makes me wonder what you really came here for." Danielle didn't answer. She pressed the ice against her split knuckles, the cold bite grounding her. Rex smirked at her silence. "That tattoo," he said, pointing with the cigar. "Eagle, globe, and anchor. Marines. My old man used to say there's two kinds of soldiers, those who come back whole and those who come back ghosts. Which are you, Marine?" Her eyes flicked up, sharp as a blade. "I came back," she said simply. Rex chuckled. "Fair enough." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Then let's talk business." He spread a worn map across the table, pinning it down with his glass. The map wasn't of highways or towns, it was supply routes. Lines drawn across counties, arrows pointing to drop sites, coded numbers marking dates and shipments. "You think we're just leather jackets and beer fights?" Rex asked. "We're the veins of something bigger. Convoys don't just vanish in the desert. Weapons don't just fall off trucks. They move because we move them." His finger tapped the map. "We're middlemen, runners, and every war has its middlemen." Danielle studied the lines. The routes were precise, the coordination tight. This wasn't chaos, this was a system. "Cole Bradford," she said evenly. Rex's smile widened, like a shark sensing blood. "Ah, so that's it." He leaned back, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. "The traitor Marine. He was one of ours for a while. Useful. Knew the channels, the paperwork, the way things slipped through unnoticed. But he made mistakes, got sloppy. Now he's a liability." Danielle's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" Rex sipped his drink, savoring the silence before answering. "He's going up for auction tomorrow. Some buyers want to make an example. Man like that, he's worth more broken than dead, and I intend to make a profit." Her stomach clenched. An auction. They were selling him like cattle. Rex leaned closer, lowering his voice until on the way. The Devil's Den throbbed with anticipation the next night. Every serpent in the county seemed to be there, their engines growling outside like caged beasts. Inside, the air was electric, thick with smoke and sweat. The bar had been transformed into a stage of power, tables shoved back, chairs lined along the walls, the floor cleared for the night's spectacle. Danielle stood off to the side, her body aching from yesterday's fights, her eyes fixed on the center where Rex sat like a king on his throne. Cole Bradford was dragged in by two bikers, his wrists zip-tied, his face bloodied. He stumbled, his scar catching the neon glow as the crowd jeered. Danielle's stomach twisted. For 7 years, she'd pictured him dead. Now, here he was, broken but alive, about to be sold like property. Rex rose slowly, his heavy frame commanding silence. He spread his arms wide, cigar smoke curling around his beard. "Brothers," he boomed, "tonight we cash in on Betrayal. This man..." He shoved Cole forward, making him stumble to his knees. Once wore the uniform, once swore to protect his brothers. But he sold them, sold us, and now he pays the price. The crowd roared approval, stomping boots and slamming bottles against tables. Danielle forced herself to keep her face still. Her heart pounded, but her eyes stayed cold. Cole looked up, blood glistening on his lip. His eyes found hers across the room, and something shifted. Desperation gave way to a grim resolve. His lips moved around the noise, forming words she alone could read. "It's done." Rex turned to the crowd again, his voice rising. "The buyers are waiting. Weapons, money, blood, all move through us. Tonight, we show the cost of crossing the serpents." He raised his cigar like a torch. The room roared, and then the lights died. Darkness swallowed the bar, followed by the crash of boots outside and the metallic crack of a loud speaker. "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Chaos exploded. Windows shattered as red strobes poured in, painting the smoke in flashing scarlet. Engines revved outside, men scrambled for weapons, and shouts of panic ripped through the den. Danielle's body moved before thought. She lunged toward Eli, who stood frozen behind the bar, wide-eyed and trembling. She shoved him to the ground just as the door splintered inward, FBI agents storming through in a wave of black vests and rifles. Rex's calm shattered for the first time. His cigar fell from his hand as he reached for the pistol on his hip, barking orders. "Hold the line. Don't let them through." The bikers surged, guns flashing, bottles smashing. Agents answered with shouted commands, beams of light, and the thunder of boots against wood. Danielle dragged Eli behind the counter, shielding him with her body as bullets cracked overhead. The sound was deafening, a storm of chaos. Her ears rang, her heart hammering, but her focus narrowed. She spotted Cole still on his knees in the center, agents swarming toward him. He was alive, for now. Rex fired into the fray, his face twisted with rage. His empire was crumbling around him, and he knew it. His gray eyes locked on Danielle through the haze. For a moment, time slowed. He saw her crouched with Eli, her hand near her waistband, her face steady despite the chaos. He leveled his gun at her. Danielle met his stare. She didn't flinch. The strobes painted the room red, white, red again. An agent barreled between them, shouting commands. Rex's finger tightened on the trigger, and then the world fractured into noise and fire. The gunshot cracked louder than thunder, echoing through the devil's den like the sound of a collapsing world. For a heartbeat, Danielle thought Rex had pulled the trigger on her, that this was how her hunt ended, face to face with a monster in a smoke-filled bar. But when her vision cleared, she saw him stagger back, gun slipping from his hand, eyes wide in something between fury and despair. The FBI had him cornered. Agents closed in from every direction, rifles trained, boots stomping over broken glass. His men were scattering like rats, some tackled and pinned, others slipping out into the night, engines revving into the distance. The empire Rex had built brick by bloody brick was disintegrating right in front of him. Danielle rose slowly, pulling Eli with her. Her ribs screamed from last night's fights. Her lip was split and her knuckles were raw, but she kept her spine straight. Her gaze never left Rex. He stood in the red strobe of emergency lights, chest heaving, gray beard damp with sweat. His hands twitched like he couldn't decide whether to surrender or fight his way out in a blaze. He looked around, desperate, at the FBI agents shouting commands, at his brothers being dragged away, at the shattered bar that had been his kingdom. Then his eyes found Danielle. "You think you won?" His voice was hoarse, almost broken, but it carried through the chaos. "You think this ends with me?" Danielle didn't answer. She just stared, calm and unyielding, her silence louder than any threat. Rex's laugh came out jagged, half mad. "You don't understand. The serpents were nothing. A middle link in a chain that runs higher than you can imagine. You cut me down, another head grows back. That's how the game works." The agents were moving closer now, shouting for him to get on the ground, their rifles steady. Danielle knew they'd shoot if he twitched wrong, and Rex knew it. Too, his eyes darted to Cole, zip-tied and bleeding, but still breathing in the custody of two agents, then back to her. "This ain't over, Marine," Rex said, voice low and steady now, almost intimate. "Men like me, we don't die in chains. We choose our ending." Before anyone could stop him, he raised the pistol with a speed that defied his size. But instead of aiming at Danielle, he pressed the barrel hard against his temple. "No!" one of the agents barked, stepping forward. Danielle took a step, hand out as if she could will him to drop the weapon, but Rex gave her one last grim smile, a man stripped of power, but not of pride. The gun roared. His body collapsed backward onto the wooden floor, blood spreading like a black halo under the strobe lights. The king of the serpents was gone in an instant, taking his secrets with him. The room fell eerily silent, save for the distant sound of engines fading into the night and the clipped voices of agents securing the scene. Danielle stood frozen, chest tight, watching as the man who had ruled Millfield for 3 decades lay lifeless on his own floor. Eli's voice broke through, trembling. He just... Yeah, Danielle said quietly, her throat raw. He chose. The agents swarmed, cuffing the last of the bikers, pulling Cole to his feet. Flashlights cut through the haze, snapping photos, marking evidence. The Devil's Den, once Rex's fortress, was now just another crime scene. Danielle exhaled slowly, the rage of 7 years giving way to something hollow. She had wanted justice, maybe even revenge, but watching Rex end himself with his own gun left her unsettled. He had robbed her of the satisfaction of breaking him, of dragging him into the light. Still, it was over. Or maybe it wasn't, because even as Rex's blood seeped into the wood, Danielle remembered his last words. The serpents were nothing. The chain run was higher. This wasn't the end of her war. It was just the end of one battle. She turned to see Cole watching her, his scar catching the flicker of red light, his eyes full of something she couldn't quite read, fear, relief, or guilt. Maybe all three. And in that moment, Danielle knew her hunt was far from finished. The courthouse air smelled faintly of old wood, paper, and nerves. Rows of cameras buzzed at the back of the room, their lenses fixed on the witness table. Reporters whispered like vultures circling a battlefield. At the center of it all sat Cole Bradford, a scar running pale down his jaw, a navy blue suit hanging too loose on his frame. The man Danielle had hunted for 7 years now looked smaller than she remembered, older, thinner, hollowed out by guilt and survival. Danielle sat in the gallery, her ribs still aching from Crusher's fists, her lip healing in a crooked scar. She had sworn she wouldn't come, told herself she didn't need to see Cole's public reckoning. But when the subpoenas turned into headlines, when whispers of military corruption and weapons trafficking hit every news outlet in the country, she found herself here, watching. The committee chairman leaned forward, white hair glinting under the fluorescent lights. His voice carried like a gavel. "Colonel Bradford, you stand accused of treason, conspiracy, and endangering American servicemen and women. You have one chance to explain yourself. Why should we believe a word you say?" The room went still. Cole adjusted the microphone, hands trembling just enough for Danielle to notice. His eyes flicked upward, toward her. For the briefest second they locked, and Danielle felt the old fury stir in her chest. She wanted to hate him, wanted to remember only the night Marcus died, but there was something raw in his gaze, something almost pleading. Cole took a deep breath. "Because I was there," he said finally. His voice was steady but low, like a man confessing sin. "Is at the edge of a grave. I participated, I sold information, and I watched men die because of my choices. I'm not here to excuse that. I'm here to name the people who made it possible." Murmurs rippled across the room. Cameras clicked like machine guns. Danielle's jaw clenched as Cole began naming names. Defense contractors, officers, supply officers she recognized from half-buried reports. The corruption had spread far deeper than she'd imagined. It hadn't been just Cole. He was a cog in a machine so large it made the Iron Serpents look like petty thugs. The chairman's gavel cracked once. "Colonel, tell us about the ambush in Kandahar, the one that killed Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez." Danielle's breath caught. The name landed in the room like a landmine. All at once she was back there. The dust, the fire, Marcus's blood on her hands. Her pulse thundered in her ears as Cole's shoulders slumped. "The ambush was my fault," Cole said quietly. "The routes, I gave them away. I told myself I was protecting my daughter. I told myself I could control the damage, but I couldn't. Marcus Rodriguez died because of me, because I was weak." The words hit Danielle like shrapnel. She had dreamed of this moment for years, Cole admitting it in front of the world. But the victory didn't taste like she thought it would. There was no rush of satisfaction, no sweet closure, just a hollow ache where Marcus used to be. A woman in the row ahead of her sobbed, clutching a folded flag. Danielle recognized her, Marcus's sister. She had come for truth too. Now she had it, and it broke her all over again. The chairman's voice pressed on. "Colonel, who are you working for?" Cole's eyes darkened. His fingers tightened on the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. They called themselves the Meridian Group, a consortium of contractors, officers, and criminal networks. Their Al was profit, pure and simple. They created demand for weapons overseas, then funneled stolen equipment back to domestic buyers through gangs like the Iron Serpents. I was their middleman, their traitor in uniform. Gasps rose in the room. One senator muttered a curse under his breath. Danielle's stomach turned. Rex had been right. He had been a small piece. The real monsters wore stars on their collars and suits worth more than her entire tour pay. Cole looked up again, searching the gallery until his eyes found her. His voice cracked as he spoke the last words. "I betrayed my brothers. I betrayed my country. And for that I will pay. But the Meridian Group, those are the ghosts that still haunt us. If you want justice, don't stop at me. Dig them up. Make them answer." Danielle's hands balled into fists. The fury was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't just about Cole anymore. It was about Marcus, Eli's brother, and every soldier whose name never made it past a casualty report. As the gavel struck, ending the session, Danielle realized her war wasn't over. The battlefield had shifted from deserts and dive bars to courtrooms and committee hearings. The ghosts were still out there, hidden in uniforms and boardrooms, and she would not rest until they were dragged into the light. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt Marcus at her back, not as a wound, but as a reason to keep going. The hearing room felt colder than the Afghan desert had ever been, not because of the air conditioning humming above, but because of the truth spilling across the polished oak tables. Danielle sat near the back, her posture ramrod straight despite the bandages under her blouse, the bruises across her ribs. Around her, families of fallen soldiers leaned forward, eyes sharp, waiting for one more revelation, waiting for something that could give their losses meaning. Cole Bradford was no longer just a disgraced colonel in a suit. He was the conduit to a shadowed empire. He'd already spoken names that rattled the building, generals who had signed off on falsified reports, CEOs who had cashed blood-soaked checks, politicians who had looked the other way while soldiers died. But everyone sensed there was one final stone to overturn. The committee chairman, his gavel hand trembling from age or fury, leaned closer. "Colonel Bradford, you've described an organized network called the Meridian Group. You've implicated high-ranking officers, defense contractors, and criminal networks. But one question remains. Who was in charge? Who held the leash?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Danielle's hand tightened around the photo of Marcus she carried in her jacket pocket, edges frayed from 7 years of constant touch. She could feel his eyes on her, urging her to listen, urging her to be ready. Cole's throat worked. His scar caught the fluorescent light as he swallowed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't just businessmen, wasn't just officers. There was someone at the top, someone who gave the orders, who kept the protection running. He paused, scanning the crowd, his eyes flicking again to Danielle, almost as if asking for permission. Then he said the name. A senator. A decorated war hero turned lawmaker, the same man who had spoken at Marcus's funeral, shaking Danielle's hand and promising her that her fiancé had died a hero. The revelation cracked like a gunshot across the room. Gasps, shouts. A woman screamed. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Danielle felt her vision tunnel. She remembered that day at the funeral, the folded flag pressed into Marcus's mother's arms, the carefully rehearsed words about sacrifice, honor, freedom, and now the same man exposed as the architect of betrayal. The bile rose in her throat. This wasn't just corruption. It was desecration. The chairman slammed his gavel, trying to restore order. "Colonel, do you have proof of this allegation?" Cole nodded once, sliding a thick binder across the table. Financial records, communications, orders routed through cutouts. The Meridian Group wasn't rogue. It was policy. He signed off on it. Danielle could barely breathe. Around her, families clutched each other, some crying, some raging. The betrayal was total. As agents moved to seize the evidence, Cole looked back one final time. His eyes, haunted but steady, locked on Danielle. He mouthed a single word. "Sorry." She didn't nod, didn't forgive, but for the first time, she didn't see only the man who had betrayed her unit. She saw the machinery that had used him, broken him, and spat him out. And she realized the truth. Her vendetta had been aimed at one cog when the entire machine was guilty. Outside, the courthouse steps were chaos. Protesters screaming for justice, reporters thrusting microphones, families holding photos of the dead. Eli was there, standing straighter than he ever had, testifying to any camera that would listen about his brother, about Tommy's letters, about how the truth mattered more than the blood spilled to uncover it. Danielle stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of 7 years pressing on her shoulders. She wasn't at peace. She doubted she ever would be. But something had shifted. Marcus's death wasn't just a scar anymore. It was a torch. The war wasn't over, but it was no longer hers alone to fight. She touched the Marine Corps tattoo on her shoulder, the ink a reminder of vows made in fire and blood. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, faithful to Marcus, faithful to the truth, faithful to justice that still had miles to go. And as the cameras turned toward her, as a reporter shouted her name, Danielle finally found the words that had been building for years. This was Nev. Era about revenge. This was about honor. And honor doesn't die, not with betrayal, not with corruption, not even with death. It survives, and it will not be buried. The crowd roared, the chains of silence broke, and Danielle Williams walked down those courthouse steps not as a grieving woman chasing a ghost, but as a soldier stepping into a new war, one fought in daylight where the whole world could finally see.